The White Lotus is back. The HBO show's third season starts on Sunday. It follows guests and employees of a fancy resort chain. The show has been praised as a sharp social satire. Written by Mike White, it delves into how wealthy people often become their worst selves on vacation. But not all of the characters are wealthy and unlikable. There's one character in particular from season 1, a hotel employee and spa manager named Belinda, played by the actress Natasha Rothwell. Belinda is warm and patient and truly wants to help the privileged guests who come to the hotel, even if they're their own worst enemies. Over the course of the season, Belinda becomes friendly with an older, wealthy white woman named Tanya, played by Jennifer Coolidge. Tanya becomes fixated on Belinda's healing presence. In this scene, the two of them are talking at dinner. Belinda speaks first.
I do think that there's a purpose in helping even rich people, you know? Helping them to find healing, making them feel more present, more aware.
Yeah.
Because rich people, they're the ones that, you know, f***ing up the whole world.
Yeah, I mean, I know a lot of rich, white, up people. They could really use you. Have you ever thought about starting, like, your own business?
Come on.
No, because I would be down for funding something like that.
This is a big moment for Belinda. But then Tanya becomes distracted and flaky, and she eventually backs out on the funding that she has dangled in front of Belinda the entire season. It is a heartbreaking ending for Belinda, who is one of the few decent people on the show. I have thought about Belinda a lot since then. This ending for her felt so sad, but also full of possibility. I kept wondering, what would Belinda do now that she had this disappointing but formative experience? And when I saw that her character was the one character coming back for season 3, I knew I wanted to talk to the actress who plays her.
My name is Natasha Rothwell, and I'm an actor, a writer, a director, and a producer. And I'm here talking today about the White Lotus and all things Natasha.
From the newsroom of The Washington Post, this is Post Reports. I'm Martine Powers. It's Saturday, February 15th. Today, Natasha Rothwell on why travel is such a useful lens for storytelling. Plus, we talk about her breakout role on Insecure and how her career has bloomed over the last decade. I want to start by talking about this upcoming season of White Lotus. And to me, this is a show about travel and about how a certain type of travel, like luxury travel, brings out, in many cases, like a real ugliness about people. I mean, I think that some of the themes from season 1 and season 2 are rich people behaving badly and selfishly and just being kind of awful to each other, even when they're in these beautiful places. But then there is your character, Belinda, who appeared in season 1 and is now coming back in this much bigger way in season 3. And up until this point, we've known her as a spa manager who has, in some cases, been, and in one case in particular, been kind of used by some of these rich people at this resort. But now she's back as somewhat of a guest, right? Like that Belinda is on this fellowship exchange program, and she's there to learn these new spa techniques, but she's also experiencing life on the other side, what it's like to stay at this hotel and dine in this hotel and experience like some of the magic of what it means to be a guest here. So I'm wondering why that flip was interesting to you, to play the same character, but have her reappear in this very different context.
Yeah, I think that there's definitely an upstairs-downstairs vibe where she's witnessed sort of the experience of the White Lotus from the outside. And I think being on the other side, still having one toe, obviously, in hospitality because she's there studying, she gets to sort of audition a version of herself, which I think most people do when they're on vacation. You kind of try on this vacation persona to see what it's like. And I think that it is exciting to her to be able to sort of cosplay as one of the sort of elite vacationers at this Thai resort.
There's this one moment from episode 1 that really stuck out to me, where it's Belinda's first night at the hotel. She's sitting down to dinner, and this other couple walks in, and they're a very well-dressed Black couple. And it's just this quick, quiet scene, but that Belinda sees them and is clearly just so excited and gives like a subtle hello to them. But it's clearly a very meaningful moment for her. Can you talk about that scene?
Yeah, it's actually a scene that I pitched Mike, and talking about travel with him. I told him this story about when I was traveling in Ireland, and I was on some green hill, looking at a castle, and there's mist everywhere. And there wasn't a Black person in sight. And like very cinematically, this entire Black family sort of walked through the mist, and I saw them, and we just sort of walked to each other and hugged before speaking. And then afterwards, I was just
my gosh.
"Do you guys speak English?" And they're like, "Yeah." And it was this young Black couple, and they had 3, I believe, kids that were like all under the age of 12. And they, homeschooled them and just thought that travel was a better educator than, the American school system, which I don't blame them. And then I told him how meaningful it is to see Black people in spaces like travel. And in writing this, having that moment for Belinda to sort of clock this couple and almost sort of project what could be, for her in that moment, I think it's meaningful, just as a subtle nod to being like, you belong here. And I think that as a Black person who travels, I just remember the first time on my way to coach seeing a Black, couple in first class. And it was a subtle thing of just like, oh, I can do that too. Like, that's not just for white people. Like, that's for everyone. And so I think it was such an amazing thing to have, Mike add to the script and sort of execute in such a beautiful way, because it's an entirely silent scene, but so much is being said.
Belinda, at least so far, and I've only watched the first few episodes of the upcoming season, but that Belinda's presence kind of complicates the message of this show, because I do feel like, you come away from the White Lotus thinking like, wow, people on vacation are miserable, and they make each other miserable, and they are often their most awful selves when, they are in new places or spending all this money to have this kind of dream experience. And that it feels like Belinda in this season makes that message, as I said, a little bit more complicated, that actually some people do find, real authentic meaning out of being in a resort like the White Lotus. I guess, how did you think about, like, if she runs sort of counter to the theme of this show so far?
I don't think she runs counter to the theme. I think that she's there to sort of balance the theme. Belinda's journey this season shows what's possible in these environments when you're approaching them from a place of sort of open mind and open heart, and really trying to receive what the trip is trying to give you or what the experience is trying to give you, instead of being prescriptive about what you want to get out of it. She's really open. And I think that's just a really beautiful lens to view the White Lotus experience, through.
Mm-hmm. So travel is a theme of several of your recent roles. In addition to being in the White Lotus now, last year you debuted How to Die Alone, about a woman who works at an airport and who aspires to travel, but she's afraid of getting on a plane. And after a near-death experience, she decides she is going to change her life. We have a clip from the trailer for the show that I think we're going to listen to now.
Here's how I see it. I'm broke. My family thinks I'm a lost cause. My love life is a joke. And the punchline is I work at an airport. I'm afraid to fly.
You can't let fear keep you from taking off.
Come on, let's go. Woman King.
Woman King.
No, say it like you mean it.
Woman King.
That's a little bit loud.
Sorry.
And because this is a role that you created and you thought up the show, I'm interested in why travel is interesting for you from like an artistic perspective. And I know that you moved around a lot as a kid, that you come from a military family. You lived several places within the U.S. and also, I think, in Turkey for a while. You also lived in Japan for a year teaching and performing. So how did that experience of just being a person who moved a lot and experienced a lot of new places affect how you see travel as this opportunity for exploring these characters?
As you mentioned, I was born into sort of a nomadic life. My dad was in the Air Force. And I think for me, that was all I knew to be true, was the ability to sort of start over and to move and to explore new environments. And with every relocation, it was an opportunity to open up my view of the world. And I think that for me, having that opportunity to see myself, reflected in those environments was very transformative as, a way to grow up. And I think that being able to write a show about someone who is sort of on the precipice of that discovery was ripe for storytelling. And to be able to show someone and the trepidation that they have when they're just on the brink of change. It feels very much like, any of sort of like those historic explorers that are, adventuring to new territories and exploring them for the first time. There's fear, but past that fear is discovery. And I think that in professional and personal development and growth, it is, what do you do when you sort of come up to that line of fear and you can just look out from that vista and decide that the fear is going to be more important than the discovery? And for me, I wanted to show someone at that point of fear and watching them sort of fall and build their wings on the way down, because I felt that was very true to my personal growth experience. And so I think more people need to talk about how messy and terrifying it is and not just sort of present a before and after picture. I didn't want her to, take some elixir or get bonked on the head and suddenly see the world different. I wanted her to scream and run into the abyss and find herself.
After the break, we talk about Natasha's time at Saturday Night Live and how she went from writer to breakout star on the HBO show Insecure. We'll be right back. Natasha, how did you first get into comedy and into acting?
Depends on who you ask. I was very precocious as a child, and my dad was an early adapter, so he had one of those giant VHS video cameras that he would record family events on. And if you look back on those tapes, I was stealing focus constantly. Being a military family, too, we also entertained ourselves a ton. Just, on long road trips from moving from Illinois to Florida. That was a road trip. And so I loved entertaining my siblings. I have 3 of them, and I loved to make people laugh. That was just something that was true and kind of innate. And I grew up in the church, so liturgical drama and doing, church plays was something that happened. And I always loved storytelling, and I always loved sort of being able to use the opportunity to be in front of people to sort of explore versions of myself with the roles that I would play. And so did high school theater, then majored in theater in college. And it's so interesting to have found the thing that made sense of me so young. I didn't have to sort of go down, different paths. I kind of always knew.
In an interview that you gave to the New York Times a while back, you talked about having improv be a big part of your early career with the Upright Citizens Brigade in New York, and you said, quote, "It sounds hyperbolic, but I feel like improv saved my life."
Yeah.
I'm curious what you meant by that.
Improv, the major tenet is, no fear, right? And when you grow up in a relatively religious environment, there's certain versions of yourself that are forbidden. And I think that improv was this sort of safe space for me to play around and audition versions of myself and feel utterly and completely supported by the people I was on stage with, because that's how improv works. And so it became this sort of like very interesting, safe petri dish that, you know, in my 20s, I was able to sort of just play, and it felt free. And I think that when you sort of embark in the, you know, the church of improv, you really do understand the power of yes and, you know, and it sounds silly and thin, but it is a huge tenet of just like when you say or do something, you have everyone else around you supporting you. And where else in life does that happen? And so I still stand by it. I think it was a very transformative experience for me.
Well, as a person who was making moves in the improv world, you ended up briefly at a place where a lot of people who are passionate about improv end up, and you were briefly a writer for SNL in 2014. This is a big year for SNL. It's the 50th anniversary of the show, and there's been a lot that's been written about its legacy and the movie that's the origin story, and people talking about like their experiences there. But you've been open in the past about how that your SNL experience was not necessarily a great one, that it negatively affected how you carried yourself, that you didn't always feel seen there, and that you felt overlooked. Why do you think that happened? Can you talk a little bit about that experience?
Yeah, I mean, make no mistake, it was a life-changing experience, and I think that it ultimately made me a better writer. It's where I really understood the adage, you know, be prolific and not perfect. Just because I was writing and creating so many sketches week to week, you kind of have to take out the inner critic and just trust your gut. And so it did affect me positively in a lot of ways, but I think I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge the fact that I was the only brown person around the writer's table. And
at a moment where that was really complicated, right? I mean, this was 2014, and SNL had just gotten all this flack for not having any Black female cast members for years.
Correct.
And that I just imagine that was a loaded moment.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, all of that political energy was a part of my joining the writing team. I wasn't selected to be on cast, but they asked me to be in the room. And I think that navigating that, it's a lot of unspoken energy. You know what I mean? Of just sort of like, there's no sort of handbook that you're given as a freshman writer on the show of just like, this is how to move. It's a lot of sort of reading the room and trying to guess what, you know, people want from you, and not knowing who.
And I imagine are worried that people have assumptions about why you're there or how you ended up there.
Yeah, perhaps. I mean, I think at the time, at that point, it was a 40-year-old, primarily white historical institution that is trying to integrate their creative space. There's going to be hiccups. And I think that they'd be foolish to claim that it was perfect and seamless, you know? And I think that they've gotten so much farther than they've been in the past. I think they've made incredible strides in the last 10 years. But yeah, I think for me, it was difficult in that sort of, you know, maelstrom of events happening.
And how did you recover from that or move on from that?
I mean, my next show after SNL was Insecure. So talk about diving into the healing cocoa butter balm of Blackness, you know? It was very much a place where I was able to take the things that I practically learned on SNL in terms of sharp comedy writing and, you know, being able to feel like I was, you know, shoulder to shoulder with some comedic giants to step into the Insecure room. I had that confidence, but it was very healing experience to be in a room where I felt seen and heard and welcomed. Yeah.
Well, I want to take the opportunity here to talk about your character from Insecure, Kelly Prenny, who I would say it looms large in any Insecure fan's heart. Kelly is hilarious. She is zany, but also incredibly confident and capable. And we have a clip here that we want to play just to give folks a sense of this character. And in this scene, we hear Kelly speaking with Issa Rae's character while Kelly is manning the bar at a fundraiser.
Kelly, this liquor has got to last all day, so you got to stop pouring so much. I'm trying to help you out. You know what they say? The stronger the libation, the bigger the donation. You see Spencer over there? He offered me a cool 5 figures for one night of passion. Now, I'll take one for the team. Just say the word.
I'll never say the word.
Yes, you can.
No.
The word is...
I'll get back to you at the end of the night.
Okay, I got you.
So talk to me about how the character of Kelly came to be.
I started in the Insecure writer's room. The pilot had been written, and they had assembled a team to break the season and start writing. And it was maybe 2 months into the writer's room. A writer by the name of Ben Dugan pitched a character named Kelly who would be added to the friend circle. And that's also when the character of Tiffany Dubois was added, just trying to sort of build out her world. And as we're writing scripts together, I had no sort of eyes on acting on the show at all. I was really focused because this was my first scripted room out of SNL, and I really wanted to sort of nail it. And a part of our process in the writer's room was to read the scripts aloud as writers. And Issa or Prentice, her co-showrunner, would just cast the writers in the room to read the script. And I was constantly being cast to read Kelly. And after we had gotten maybe halfway through the season and Kelly sort of showing up a bit, Issa and Prentice invited me into their office, and I thought I was in trouble because I'm a good girl. And I was like, oh no, I'm being called to the principal's office. And yeah, they said they wanted me to play Kelly. You know, I didn't even audition for it. And I was just like shocked and immediately cried because it was one of those things where I'd gone from a place that I didn't feel seen to a place where I felt very seen. And she knew that I was a multi-hyphenate. And as much as I was trying to hide it, she was just like, girl, you need to be in front of the camera. I was like, okay, I got you. And so that's sort of how it started. In the first season, it was just guest starring. And then I became a series regular season 2 forward.
Why do you think people love Kelly so much?
One of my favorite quotes about comedy is George Saunders. He says, comedy is the truth told quickly. And I think that Kelly's a truth machine. I think that she's very honest, and that doesn't negate her loyalty. So she rides for her friends, but she will be the first one to tell them if they're doing something stupid. She'll be the first one to read them. And she gots them. You know, that's a part of the way she holds her friends. And I think people are attracted to that level of truth. And I think she's also kind of unexpected at the same time. So I think that, you know, people watch to see what she's going to say or do. But yeah, and she gives the vibe that she's everybody's friend. And I love being able to sort of, or to play characters like that feel like they really connect to the audience.
It's interesting that you became famous with a role like Kelly, and you know, like with a character who's so confident and brash and just like kind of moves through the world in a certain way. But it seems like more recently with Mel and How to Die Alone and Belinda and the White Lotus that you've chosen characters who are in some cases overlooked and in some cases like trying to figure out like how to navigate their way in the world, and who don't always embody or often don't embody that kind of confidence. Was that a choice for you? And I guess, what do you find appealing now in playing characters who are more overlooked, who are a little less sure of themselves?
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting is that, like, I've played characters like Mel and Belinda before, but in, like, the theatrical sense. I went to school for theater. I'm classically trained. I did way more drama, but comedy for me is actually harder than drama. And I think that having good dramatic chops allow you to play comedy better. And so I love that Kelly was sort of my entry point into Hollywood, but being able to do dramatic roles also scratches an itch that allows me to sort of use all of the tools and all of the stories that live inside of me, and not just those that are, you know, comedic. And I think that playing characters like Mel and Belinda that are chronically overlooked and that are trying to find their way are just true to my lived experience as a Black woman. Being able to explore those is really cathartic. And I think even playing Kelly's cathartic. Like, I would always say my psychological sort of MO for Kelly was she grew up in a world where she never doubted her worth. Like, that was just her psyche. Like, she knew who she was. She was born into this world, a confident Black woman who never doubted herself. And while that's an amazing, cathartic character to play, that is not my lived experience. Like I wake up every day and I'm like, really? We're doing this again? So like I doubt myself constantly. And so to be able to play in that, it's also exciting in a way where it's just like facing my demons when I play these characters that are just as lost as I have been or am currently. And I think that every actor wants to sort of play in all of the sandboxes.
Natasha, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun.
Natasha Rothwell is an actor, writer, producer, and showrunner. You can watch her on season 3 of The White Lotus, premiering tomorrow on HBO. That's it for Post Reports. Thanks for listening. Today's show was produced by Ariel Plotnick and edited by Maggie Penman. It was mixed by Sam Baer. I'm Martine Powers. We'll be back on Monday with more stories from the Washington Post.